You call that a real job? Vivian's shrill voice cut through the tense silence at the dinner table like a knife. I flinched, my fork clattering against the plate. My mother-in-law's beady eyes bored into me, her thin lips curled in disdain. Wasting your days playing around with colors and shapes on a computer. How avant-garde. Across the table, Eli kept his head down, avoiding my pleading gaze. I opened my mouth to respond, but Vivian barreled on, her voice dripping with contempt. I don't know why I even let you stay under my roof. At least Eli made an honest living with his finance job before. She trailed off, though the implication hung heavy in the air. Ever since Eli's unexpected layoff and our move into her home, Vivian had wasted no opportunity to demean my career as a freelance graphic designer. Mom, that's enough, Eli muttered, but lacked the conviction to meet her glare. Hot shame burned my cheeks as unwanted memories resurfaced. The endless job searches culminating in rejections for roles I was overqualified for. The forced smiles as I explained my unconventional career to friends and relatives, their skepticism thinly veiled. But this was a new low, having my passion, my art, denigrated as a silly indulgence within my own home, by my own family. I swallowed hard, my appetite extinguished. I may not bring in the income your precious Eli once did, but my work is still valid. I take pride in it. Vivian barked a humorless laugh. Pride? In scribbling doodles like a child? Her scornful gaze raked over me, cold with dismissal. I expected better for my son's wife. You're nothing but a disappointment, just like... The shrill ring of the kitchen timer mercifully cut her off. Vivian pushed back her chair with a huff. Well, I'd better check on those pies. We certainly can't have those getting overcooked, unlike some people's ambitions in this house. As she bustled away, an uneasy silence fell over the dining room. I caught Eli's eye, desperate for solidarity, for defense against his mother's relentless belittling. But he just gave a small shrug and dropped his gaze, polishing off his plate. The message was clear. He wouldn't risk crossing Vivian, not while we relied on her hospitality. Clenching my fists until my nails dug crescents into my palms, I fought the hot sting of tears. Our situation was temporary, a difficult but necessary path to get back on our feet after Eli's job loss. At least that's what I'd told myself when we accepted Vivian's offer to move in. How long could we endure her toxic presence? I wondered, my dream career already withering under her disdain. As Vivian's barbed laughter echoed from the kitchen, a leaden knot formed in my chest. This was no home, it was a battlefield, and I was shaping up to be the first casualty. The following week, a new domestic routine took hold that made Vivian's true intentions abundantly clear. You'd better get started on those dishes, dear, she said in a sugary sweet tone after clearing the breakfast plates. And don't forget to wipe down the counters. We don't want any unsightly stains. I frowned at the rapidly growing pile in the sink, but dutifully began scrubbing away the remnants of Eli and Vivian's hearty country breakfast. Eggs, bacon, the works. My own meal had been a simple bowl of oatmeal, per Vivian's instructions. Can't have you packing on any unnecessary pounds, she had tittered, patting my arm in mock concern. Wouldn't want my Eli to regret his choice in wives now, would we? By the time I drained the sink, Vivian had already vanished to run her other endless errands and chores, leaving me alone to clean the kitchen to her exacting standards. The same went for the bathrooms, the laundry, dusting every nook and cranny until the house gleamed. You should be grateful I'm keeping you busy, she said when I dared to protest the relentless workload one evening, with your unconventional career situation. Her meaning was clear. By her reckoning, I was little more than a freeloader without my real job to occupy me. The chores were her way of justifying my presence under her roof. Eli did his part, at least, diligently searching and applying for any finance opening that matched his experience. But his disillusionment after being cast aside by his former employer was palpable. When he trudged home night after night, head bowed in defeat from another fruitless round of interviews, it was Vivian who offered comfort and pep talks. Her cloying reassurances that he had simply gotten unlucky slowly dissolved his self-confidence while driving a wedge between us. Poor Eli, she cooed, while I scrubbed furiously at a stubborn scorch mark on the stove. It must be so humiliating, having to rely on his dear old mother while his wife contributes nothing to the household. Gritting my teeth, I refused to meet her sly, taunting gaze. I knew full well what her game was, isolating me, chipping away at my self-worth and marriage until I was made to feel like an utter burden. She had taken full advantage of our circumstances, wielding her temporary generosity like a vice to crack me from her son's life. Once shattered, he would have no choice but to turn fully to her for support and approval. The realization struck like a dousing of ice water. My own mother-in-law, scheming against me with ruthless determination. How many of Eli's past relationships had crumbled under her manipulations? No more, I vowed silently, wringing the tattered dish rag between white-knuckled fists. Vivian wanted a war of attrition? She was going to get one. When Eli trudged in that evening, I met him at the door with a grim smile. "We need to talk, in private." His brow furrowed at my tone, but I was done playing Vivian's gamekeeper's prisoner. If she wanted to fight for her son's soul, I would match her fury with a cunning all my own. No more Mrs. Nice daughter-in-law. Over the next few weeks, Vivian's campaign of emotional sabotage kicked into high gear. Not a day went by without some snide remark or underhanded slight designed to reinforce my worthlessness. "Don't you ever get tired of staring at that computer screen all day, dear?" she sneered while I typed away at a logo commission one afternoon. So cosmically unfulfilling. I grit my teeth, refusing to rise to her bait. The client's deposit money was a lifeline in our strained financial situation, one Vivian constantly held over my head. "I'm just worried for your mental health, cooped up in here with no real purpose," she continued with a derisive cluck. "What kind of life is that for a bright young woman?" Thankfully, Eli was out pounding the pavement at another round of fruitless interviews. I wasn't eager to suffer Vivian's harangues with an audience. However, when a promising graphic design opportunity did arise requiring me to attend meetings, she was lying in wait. "You're not seriously considering leaving the house looking like that?" Vivian's shrill voice lashed out as I hurried down the hall, my nicest blouse and slacks neatly pressed. I pulled up short, fingers tightening around the portfolio case. "Meaning what exactly?" "Well, just look at you." She raked a critical gaze over my appearance. "Wrinkled, frumpy, with coin-sized bags under your eyes from hyperventilating over those silly doodles all night." Scalding humiliation burned my cheeks as her words struck home. Between the endless chores and desperate need to prove myself with design gigs, I admittedly hadn't paid much attention to my appearance beyond basic grooming. Vivian's bony arms crossed over her chest, lips pursed in exaggerated disgust. "Is that really the image you want to present to potential employers, dear? They'll smell your slobbery desperation from a mile away. Do us all a favor and spare yourself the embarrassment." The words sliced like a barbed whip, stealing my breath. I clutched the portfolio tighter, blinking back enraged tears as she savored her dominance. I knew playing into her manipulation was exactly what she wanted. But excavating the tattered remnants of my self-confidence proved futile against her relentless torrent of derision. In the end, I canceled the meeting and all future design inquiries, feigning some invented excuse about needing to prioritize the family. Vivian's shark-like smile that evening said it all. Another tendril of my identity brutally pruned in her crusade of subjugation. I was gradually being hollowed out from the inside, hollowed out from the vibrant, passionate woman Eli had fallen for. He remained oblivious, of course, lost in his own dejected fog of unemployment. The few times I tentatively aired my growing resentment of his mother, he just averted his gaze, murmuring some vague reassurance that she ultimately meant well. On the rare nights we connected intimately, I could sense his arousal waning along with his respect for me. Who was I becoming under Vivian's influence? Just another outmatched foe, cowed and depleted by her twisted convictions until only a shell remained? No, some faint flicker of defiance raged from deep within. I wouldn't go down without a fight. Vivian wanted a monster of her own making. She was about to get one. Jaw set, I holed away on the computer, scouring for any digital fingerprints that could expose Vivian's machinations to Eli and the rest of the family. The first counterattack was coming. If she thought she could grind my spirit into submission, she had drastically underestimated my resolve. It was time to go nuclear on the battlefield she created. No more games. No more hollow smiles, masking seething hatred. All-out martial war was about to commence under her very roof. For weeks, I scoured every corner of the house and internet for clues about Vivian's motivations, burning the midnight oil on the computer long after she'd gone to bed. I cross-referenced public records, newspaper archives, social media profiles, anything that could expose her twisted agenda. Finally, the pieces began to fall into place. Pages of printed evidence stared back at me, damning in its comprehensiveness. "Everything okay, dear?" Vivian's sugary voice sliced through my concentration. I quickly minimized the browser window as she poked her head into the cramped home office. "You've seemed so preoccupied lately." "Just working," I mumbled, avoiding her prying gaze. "Keeping myself busy with some design projects." "How industrious." Her bony fingers stroked my shoulder, feigning motherly concern. "But you know, obsessing over those little drawings won't undo the past." I tensed at her words, wondering if she was baiting me. "Like Eli's failed relationships before you." There it was, the barb I'd been anticipating, laced with carefully calculated venom. I slowly pivoted to face her. "What are you suggesting?" Vivian's cold eyes glinted with cruel amusement. "Come now, you're not that dull. Even you must have noticed the pattern emerging." She squeaked loudly, shaking her head in feigned disappointment. "A spate of bright young women in Eli's life, full of promise and prospects. Until gradually, they start drifting away, becoming unmotivated, unambitious, resentful even." My blood turned to ice as she laid out the sickening implications. "Those poor girls simply didn't have the mental fortitude to be part of our family, to take on the duties required of an Elliot matriarch. They broke under the strain, or was it something else that broke them?" Reflexively, I curled my hands into fists to mask their trembling. "If you're insinuating what I think you are, I'm simply connecting the dots, dear." Vivian clucked her tongue again, as if chastising a petulant child. "Face facts, you're following the same inescapable trajectory as the others. Your professional situation is merely a precipitating factor, not the root cause." Her skeletal finger wagged in my face as she savored dragging out the reveal. "I did what I had to in order to preserve my son's future prospects, to protect him from diminishing attachments that would only wither his potential." The words spilled out in a sickening rush, past relationships poisoned through steady emotional attrition. Financial entrapment, isolation, relentless needling until the woman's self-worth splintered. All orchestrated by Vivian in a coldly premeditated campaign of subjugation. You monster!" I choked out, struggling not to retch. "How could you do that to Eli, to your own son?" "I did it for Eli," she snapped, that familiar flash of contempt hardening her features. "To spare him the heartbreak of making the wrong choice and resigning himself to mediocrity. A mother's love can be cruel at times, but at least I had his best interests at heart." Her serpentine tongue flicked out to moisten her pursed lips. "This time will be no different, I'm afraid. For his own good, you simply have to go." With a final vindicated smirk, Vivian slithered from the room, leaving me to absorb the full, monstrous truth alone. Gripping the computer desk to steady my shaking limbs, I could no longer deny the depravity unfolding in slow motion around me. My mother-in-law wasn't just a manipulative harpy. She was a calculated, silver-tongued sociopath, systematically undermining my identity to its very core. All in the name of keeping her claws firmly latched into Eli's soul, molding his destiny to fit her twisted, narrow convictions. Anyone who threatened that control was simply another target to be crushed and discarded. White-hot rage seared through my shock, tempering into grim determination. If Vivian thought she could cow me into submission like her past victims, she had sorely underestimated this particular adversary. With a trembling hand, I reopened the research files, pages of tawdry deceptions meticulously logged, her own smug digital fingerprints preserved in sickening detail. I wouldn't just confront this sadistic harridan. I would dismantle her respectable facade, blow by agonizing blow until nothing remained but the gnarled, bitter husk she truly was. The game was on. This time, Vivian was going to learn just what kind of monster she'd created. After Vivian's chilling confession, I knew I had to act fast before her toxic influence metastasized any further. Gathering up the incriminating evidence I'd compiled, I made a silent vow. One way or another, this torment would soon be over. The first step was recruiting an ally on the inside. While Eli remained disturbingly blind to his mother's machinations, His father, Nathan, had increasingly picked up on the strain she was inflicting. One evening, after another tension-filled family dinner, I caught him alone in the den while Vivian was preoccupied with dishes. "We need to talk," I murmured under my breath, gesturing for him to follow me into the hallway. Nathan's brow furrowed with concern, but he complied without a word. "I can't take much more of this," I confessed in a hoarse whisper once we were out of earshot. Vivian's muffled humming from the kitchen made the hair prickle on my neck. "You know what she's been doing to me, don't you?" Nathan's haggard expression made it clear the truth wasn't lost on him. With a reluctant sigh, he gave a solemn nod. "You're not the first to suffer her special attention. It's a miracle Eli and I have stayed sane all these years." My hands trembled as I clutched the file, forcing the words out in a ragged rush. "It's even worse than we thought. She confessed to sabotaging Eli's previous relationships on purpose. Everyone who got close to him, she was systematically destroying them out of some sick, twisted obligation." A muscle twitched in Nathan's weathered jaw as he absorbed my words. For a long moment, he could only stare at me in stunned silence. "I had my suspicions," he finally rasped, scrubbing a hand over his face. "But to have it confirmed like this—" He shook his head in a slow, mournful arc before squaring his shoulders with newfound resolution. "No more. This has gone on for far too long." Reaching out to grasp my arm, Nathan gave it a reassuring squeeze, his eyes boring into mine with surprising urgency. "You get yourself out of here, you hear? Get somewhere safe while I figure out how to deal with the old bat for good." "But Eli—" I started to protest. "Leave my son to me." He cut me off with gruff insistence. "He's been too deep in her trance for too damn long. I'll make him understand what kind of vile creature he's been defending." A tense silence stretched between us, punctuated by the faint clink of dishware from the kitchen. "Be ready to expose all this at the next family gathering," Nathan continued in a low rasp. "Air out all her skeletons for everyone to see. It's long past time they knew the truth about their matriarch." I could only nod, a surge of gratitude temporarily rendering me speechless. At last, I had an ally willing to stand up to Vivian's tyranny. For now, start making your escape plans. Get yourself sorted with a safe place to land. His brow furrowed as a new thought occurred to him. "And whatever you do, don't tip off that you're onto her schemes. The less she suspects, the better our advantage." My heart hammered as the magnitude of the situation crystallized. This was it. The endgame against Vivian's poisonous influence was finally being set into motion. Tucking the file securely under my arm, I gave a determined nod. Consider it done. No more skulking in the shadows, letting that wretched succubus grind me down piece by piece. A flicker of approval ghosted across Nathan's stern features. "Attaway, remember, whatever bridges you have to burn on your way out, it'll be worth it. Just watch your back until it's time to strike." With a final grim nod of understanding, we separated, the first shots having been fired in the looming confrontation to dismantle Vivian's toxic dynasty once and for all. Steeling my nerves, I turned towards plotting out the footwork for my escape. The old crone wanted an adversary worthy of her cruelty. She was about to get her deepest, darkest wish. The next few weeks were an agonizing exercise in subterfuge as Nathan and I laid the groundwork for our offensive against Vivian, keeping my hatred simmering under icy control while she continued her insidious manipulations was a Herculean effort. "Dear, you're looking peaky," Vivian crooned with mock concern one afternoon, eyeing my taut expression over her teacup. "I do hope you're not letting stress over your career troubles get the better of you." My fingernails dug into my palms as I fought back the torrent of vile retorts. So smug, so utterly self-assured that her twisted convictions granted carte blanche to emotionally eviscerate anyone who crossed her path. Mercifully, the weekend of the biannual Elliott family reunion finally arrived, providing the perfect stage to execute our long-awaited strike. While Vivian preened about playing the dutiful hostess, I quietly assembled the comprehensive evidence files Nathan and I had compiled. "Everything's in place," Nathan murmured under his breath as we made final preparations. Dozens of relatives began filtering into the spacious backyard, drawn by Vivian's empty promises of bonhomie. "You sure you're ready to go through with this?" I inhaled deeply, fueling my nerves against the coming onslaught. "More than ready," It's long past time that wretched phony was unmasked for everybody to see. No more games, no more hollow facades of civility. This was about to get brutally, ruinously real. As the afternoon dragged on, I maintained a calculated poker face, watching Vivian flit from group to group with her signature plastic smile. The utter audacity of her public performance after admitting her monstrousness made my skin crawl. "If I could have everyone's attention," she finally called out in a saccharine lilt, waving a simpering hand for silence. "I just wanted to take a moment to welcome you all the Elliott family homestead and—" The droning of her false platitudes tuned out as I caught Nathan's terse nod beside me. Showtime. Striding forward with the file cradled against my chest, I shoved my way into the center of the patio, fixing Vivian with a look of undisguised revulsion. A startled hush washed over the gathering as all eyes turned toward us. "That's enough of your grotesque pantomime, you wretched soulless harpy," I spat, every pent-up syllable simmering with palpable venom. "We're all quite familiar with what a despicable, manipulative monster you truly are." Vivian's staged smile curdled into a look of apoplectic rage. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" I shot back, unshakably coldly. "How dare you present this facade of genteel hospitality after all the lives you've mercilessly worked to unravel over the years?" With a deft hand, I cracked open the file and began coldly reciting the highlights from Vivian's documented trail of cruelty. The financial constraints, the cruel taunts, the systematic dismantling of her victim's sense of self-worth. A chorus of horrified gasps and muttering echoed around the patio as one ugly truth after another poured out. "You did this to me," I declared, glaring at her with undisguised loathing. "You did this to all those girls unlucky enough to catch your precious Eli's heart before me. Anything at all, to keep your son under your dominion like some sort of deranged, emotional succubus." The word hung heavy over the patio, weighted with grotesque implication. Vivian, to her credit, had descended into sputtering, incoherent rage. "Monstrous lies," she finally shrieked, stabbing a clawed finger in my direction. "Everything I've done has been to preserve the integrity of this family, to keep us from being polluted by grasping, unworthy leeches like this spiteful harridan." I leveled an icy glare, feeding off the horrified energy rippling through the gathered Elliots. "You can drop the martyr act now, Vivian. We have testament after testament thoroughly documenting your toxic, sociopathic crusade to undermine anyone foolish enough to love your son." I let the damning file drop at her feet in revulsion. "You're an emotional terrorist, plain and simple, and you've been exposed to everyone here for the festering, irredeemable cancer you are." Vivian visibly wilted under the weight of silent condemnation from the surrounding family. One by one, the circle tightened around her, driving the twisted matriarch into a corner like the rabid animal she was. "Get out!" A gruff, furious voice cut through the tension. Nathan, finally free from her web, stalked forward with unvarnished loathing twisting his features. "Get out of my house, you miserable succubus. Your reign of terror is over." In that moment, the indomitable Vivian Elliott shriveled into a pitiable, broken creature. The rank stench of her malignance finally laid bare for all to behold. Satisfaction sang through my veins as I turned to watch her slinking, shunned and disgraced out into the lonely night. My own personal demon had finally been exorcised, and the future, while still shrouded in lingering hurt, finally shone with a glimmer of hope for redemption at last. The days following Vivian's brutal exposure at the family reunion were a maelstrom of turmoil. The Elliott clan, so accustomed to putting on airs of unity and decorum, had been irrevocably fractured by the truth about their matriarch's depravity. Entire branches of the family tree followed Vivian into exile, stubbornly clinging to her perfidious lies out of misplaced loyalty or sheer inability to accept her monstrous actions. Sister turned against brother, cousin against cousin, as age-old allegiances combusted into acrimonious infighting. Through it all, a hollow-eyed Eli could only watch in numb disbelief as the bedrock of his existence crumbled to ruin. For so long, he had been under his mother's diabolic spell, his sense of identity and priorities hopelessly warped to serve her pathological needs. I never truly saw her for what she was," he murmured one evening in a voice leached of all emotion. "How could I have been so blind?" We sat together on the back patio steps, the chilly night air lending a funereal pall. I reached over, clasping his hand in silent solidarity. "Your devotion as a son isn't something to censure yourself over," I said softly. "Vivian's skill as a master manipulator is what blinded you to her true nature for so long." Eli dragged in a ragged breath, squeezing his eyes shut as memories undoubtedly flooded back. The endless criticisms, the insidious needling against every relationship, that relentless push to surrender his individuality. "She really did think she was protecting me, didn't she?" he said at last, anguish clouding his features. "In that sick, twisted way of hers, she deluded herself into believing I needed her. Tough love to grow into the man she envisioned." My throat tightened at the naked vulnerability in his voice. For years, Vivian had stripped away his sense of self-worth and autonomy, leaving behind an emotional husk devoid of anything but codependent obedience to her narcissistic whims. "I'm so sorry, Eli," I whispered, feeling the sting of tears, "for not seeing it sooner, for ever letting her get her claws into us like that." His answering look was harrowed but clear. "Don't apologize, not for a second. She's the one who has to live with being a goddamn monster." A terse nod punctuated his words. For the first time I could remember, Eli carried the spark of unflinching resolution in his gaze. The spell was broken, Vivian's influence reduced to so much wasteful toxin being finally purged. Perhaps sensing this pivotal shift, Nathan quietly emerged onto the patio, a haggard older man suddenly freed of decades of emotional shackles. He moved to stand beside us in solemn solidarity. "So it's done then," he murmured in a gravelly tone. "The Dowager Demon has been cast into the pit at long last." Eli gave a hollow nod, squeezing my hand tighter as Nathan settled onto the step beside us with bone-weary resignation. "It will take some recalibrating," he continued somberly. "For all of us, but most of all you, son. She didn't just undermine your partners, she systematically stripped you of any sense of self beyond her ambitions. Rebuilding that identity, overcoming those conditioned insecurities, it'll be a daily battle for a while yet." Silence hung heavy between them as the weight of Vivian's psychic toll sank in. So much damage inflicted, so much work ahead to heal the grievous, indelible scars. But her reign of terror was finally, mercifully over. "We'll get through it," I vowed resolutely, clutching Eli's hand with renewed determination. "Both of us, together this time. That cancerous influence is gone for good." A flicker of gratitude warmed Nathan's gruff features as he regarded me. "I have no doubt you will. A burden's been lifted we didn't even realize we were carrying all these years." Rising to his feet with an inscrutable glance towards the house's flickering lights, he cleared his throat. "Whenever you two are ready to start fresh, well, you've got a hell of a lot of personal healing ahead, but at least that path is clear now." Summoning a rueful chuckle, he briefly rested a hand on Eli's shoulder as he moved to retreat back inside. "Take all the time you need, son. That twisted karma has finally unwound, now it's just a matter of finding which path leads away from its ruins." The night breeze whispered across the yard, carrying whispers of possibility for the reclaimed future suddenly laid bare before us. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself a tentative breath of hope. Vivian was gone, exorcised. Now the true revival could finally begin. The months following our escape from Vivian's toxic web were an arduous journey of healing and rediscovery. Eli, in particular, fought to remake his sense of identity, to untangle decades of conditioning that had molded him into a hopelessly codependent extension of his mother's malignant narcissism. There were setbacks, of course, nights when the old insecurities would flare up, driving him into brooding funks until I managed to coax him back from that familiar abyss of self-doubt. Her spectral influence lingered like a cancerous remnant, poisoning his confidence at the most inopportune times. But we persevered, leaning on one another through the darkness. I refused to let Vivian's legacy consume us, no matter how viciously and stubbornly it clung to the roots of our relationship. Soon enough, my own artistic passions reignited in the wake of that toxic drought. Commissions and graphic design gigs steadily poured in, each completed piece chipping away at the rubble that Hag had strewn across my self-worth. "You're really starting to hit your stride," Eli murmured one evening, studying my latest logo mock-up with a contemplative gaze. "This work, it's undeniably brilliant, Marla, No vile opinions can refute that truth anymore. The unveiled sincerity in his voice washed over me like a soothing balm for the old, barely healed wounds. Gone was the meek, beaten-down husk of a man who had meekly abdicated his identity to Vivian's depraved whims. This Eli was revitalized, newly confident in voicing his convictions, without the looming fear of displeasing his manipulative parent. Free to be his own person at long last. Even Nathan, cordoned off in his separate home across town, exhibited remarkable strides in shaking off Vivian's corrosive influence. Some evenings he would stop by unannounced, hell-bent on reconnecting through the simple joys of family he had been deprived of for decades. "So this is what an Elliott matriarch should truly be," he rumbled approvingly as I dished up plates of homemade chicken parmesan, his first taste of my cooking in years. One whose passion centers around bringing people together rather than, well, you know. Eli and I exchanged a loaded look, both of us intimately aware of just what kind of matriarch Vivian had been, the kind whose legacy we were both still working to extract from our psyches. "It's a work in progress," I said with a tight smile. "But that's a good problem to have, building something nurturing out of the rubble she left behind." "Amen to that," Nathan replied gruffly, tucking into his meal with gusto. Occasionally he would grunt an appreciative nod between hefty bites, as if committing every tender, zesty forkful to memory. Simple family moments like this were no longer to be taken for granted, not after Vivian had deprived the Elliott clan of genuine intimacy and trust for far too long. Over time, Eli's professional life also righted itself in Vivian's absence. A promising financial advising position opened up, and to my immense pride, he attacked the opportunity with a boldness and dynamism that had been sorely lacking under his mother's oppression. "They'd be damned fools not to scoop you up immediately," I murmured as he prepped for the final round of interviews in his characteristic tailored suit. "Vivian's poison is expunged. Now they'll get to see you exactly for who you are." He grinned, that old self-assured charisma rekindled in his eyes as he reached over to squeeze my hands. "And who, pray tell, is that?" he asked with an arched brow. "A strong, ethical man who won't neglect his convictions or family," I shot back, matching his rakish look. "The kind of person I should have been able to see all those years ago, before that decrepit succubus warped your identity beyond recognition." His grin widened into an expression of unvarnished joy and love, the old scars finally mended enough to let happiness pour forth undeterred. Leaning in, he claimed my lips in a fiery, passionate embrace, one sealed after years of toxicity, despair, and harrowing conflict. We had both been forged anew from the smelter of Vivian's cruelty. Hardened, certainly, but undeterred in our quest to neutralize her lingering influences once and for all. When Eli landed the position a week later, we celebrated with a toast not just to his achievement, but to our collective rise from the ashes of that miserable psychopath's machinations. A new life, a new world of opportunity beckoned, one finally free from the crushing weight of that demented matriarch's control. The morning saga ended with Eli and I arm in arm at one of my own gallery openings nearly a year later, beatifically expectant with our first child as the ultimate repudiation of Vivian's derangement. Around us, a teeming crowd of colleagues, friends, and family congregated to celebrate my ascendant artistic achievements, solemnly reveling in the hard-won victories we had each carved from the rubble of past trauma. In that electrifying moment of validation and renewal, Vivian Elliott's malignancy was finally, conclusively extinguished by the twin fires of perseverance and love. She would always be a part of our shared histories. That much was undeniable. But her defeat and our dogged efforts to emerge unbowed from her cruelty's cauldron ensured that the last echoing remnants of that toxic matriarch's depravity had been forever exorcised. The Elliott's healing could truly begin at last. "What a joke!" Derek's mocking voice echoed through the hallway, shattering my world into pieces. "You really think that raggedy, upcycled garbage is going to sell? Wake up, sis. Raylan's living in a fantasy land." I froze, my heart pounding in my ears as I listened to my husband's scathing words, each one driving a fresh dagger into my soul. This wasn't some stranger criticizing my life's work. This was the man I'd loved and trusted, the father of my child. Harper's giggle cut through the stillness like a knife. Mom's so delusional. She honestly believes people will pay top dollar for old rags sewn together. Tears stung my eyes as the weight of their betrayal crashed down upon me. How could they be so cruel, so dismissive of the passion that fueled every stitch, every design born from repurposed materials? My dream wasn't just some whimsical flight of fancy. It was a commitment to sustainability, to breathing new life into the discarded. As their laughter subsided, I slipped away, my mind racing with a torrent of emotions: hurt, anger, determination. For too long, I'd turned a blind eye to Derek's subtle jabs and Harper's growing resentment. But this was a line crossed, a violation of trust that could never be undone. Later that night, as Derek snored beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing within, I made a decision. No more playing the victim. No more allowing them to trample my dreams underfoot. If they wanted to see me as a joke, I'd give them a punchline they'd never forget. The next morning, I called my best friend, Elise, a former lawyer with a razor-sharp mind. She was the only person I could trust with the truth, and the only one who could help me fight back. "Elise, I need your help," I whispered, glancing over my shoulder to ensure Derek hadn't overheard. "Things with Derek, they're not what they seem." Her voice was a lifeline, a beacon of clarity in the chaos. "Tell me everything." And so I did, laying bare the years of emotional neglect, the financial misdeeds I'd uncovered, and the gut-wrenching betrayal that had shattered my world. With each word, I felt a weight lifting, replaced by a steely resolve to take back control of my life and my business. "We'll make him pay," Elise vowed, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Every penny he stole, every insult he hurled, he'll answer for it all. Starting today, we document everything." As I hung up the phone, a newfound sense of purpose coursed through my veins. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was done being the punchline. It was time to rewrite the joke, and this time, I'd be the one delivering the cutting final line. Elise didn't waste any time. Within days, she'd formulated a meticulous plan to expose Derek's misdeeds and secure my financial future. "First things first," she said during one of our clandestine meetings at a quiet cafe. "We need to document every single transaction he's made using your business accounts." I nodded, pulling out a thick manila envelope stuffed with bank statements and financial records. "I've been gathering evidence for months. Look at these numbers. He's been siphoning funds into his personal accounts, leaving me with just enough to keep the business afloat." Elise's brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "That snake, he's been embezzling from you this whole time." "It gets worse." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the next revelation. "I overheard him on the phone with his banker last week. He's been lying about our profits, cooking the books to make it look like we're barely scraping by, so he can claim you're a financial burden and gain leverage in the divorce proceedings," Elise concluded, her jaw clenched tight. "Despicable." Our conversation was interrupted by the shrill ringing of my phone. Derek's name flashed across the screen, and I felt a surge of revulsion. Without hesitation, I declined the call and muted the ringer. Elise's eyes narrowed. What did that weasel want? Probably checking up on me, making sure his little cash cow is still producing. I spat the words like venom, years of pent-up resentment bubbling to the surface. Sliding a worn voice recorder across the table, Elise fixed me with a determined stare. "Start wearing this at all times. We need to catch him in the act, get him on record spewing his vitriol." The weight of the device in my palm felt heavy, a tangible reminder of the war I was waging. But I was done being a victim. It was time to fight back. That night, as Derek and I sat down for dinner, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Harper picked at her food, her gaze flickering between us like a spectator at a boxing match. "What's gotten into you lately?" Derek sneered, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "You've been acting awfully strange." I took a deep breath, pressing the record button beneath the table. "Just focused on the business, that's all." "Just," he scoffed, stabbing at his steak with more force than necessary. "That little hobby of yours? Don't kid yourself, Ray. It's never going to amount to anything more than a drain on our finances." Harper's eyes widened, but she remained silent, no doubt fearing the wrath of her father's sharp tongue. "You know, Derek," I replied, keeping my voice measured and even, "for someone who claims to support my dreams, you sure have a funny way of showing it." His fork clattered against the plate as his fist slammed down on the table. Support your dreams? Don't make me laugh. Every penny I've wasted on that ridiculous project is a penny too many. The words stung, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I met his venomous glare with a steely gaze of my own. Well then, it's a good thing you won't have to waste any more of your precious money on me. Rising from the table, I fixed him with a cold smile. I'll be sure to pack my bags tonight. As I left the room, Derek's sputtering protests fell on deaf ears. The war had begun, and I had no intention of losing. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Derek prowled the halls like a caged animal, his footsteps heavy with barely contained rage. Whenever our paths crossed, his eyes bored into me, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in my resolute facade. But I refused to break. With each snide remark, each thinly veiled insult, I stood my ground, meeting his vitriol with stony silence. The recorder in my pocket became a talisman of sorts, a constant reminder of the evidence I was against him. Harper, caught in the crossfire, retreated into herself. Gone was the carefree teenager who once laughed and joked with her father. In her place was a hollow-eyed shadow, flinching at raised voices and avoiding us both whenever possible. It was during one of these encounters that the dam finally burst. "What's wrong, Princess?" Derek sneered as Harper scurried past, her gaze fixated on the floor. "Cat got your tongue?" She froze, her shoulders tensing, and for a moment I thought she might flee. But then, slowly, she turned to face him, and the look in her eyes sent a chill down my spine. "Just leave me alone," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek threw back his head and laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that set my teeth on edge. "What's the matter? Daddy's little girl too good to talk to her old man now?" "Derek, that's enough." I stepped forward, placing a hand on Harper's trembling shoulder. She said, "Leave her alone." His gaze snapped to mine, eyes glittering with malice. "Stay out of this, Raylan. This is between me and my daughter." "Your daughter?" I echoed, my grip tightening on Harper's shoulder. "Since when do you give a damn about being a father? All you care about is yourself and your precious money." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. For a heartbeat, Derek was speechless, his face contorting with rage. Then, like a coiled serpent, he struck. "How dare you?" he snarled, taking a step forward. "After everything I've done for this family, for your pathetic little hobby, and this is the thanks I get?" Harper flinched, shrinking back against me, but I stood my ground. Reaching into my pocket, I thumbed the record button, capturing every venomous word. "You've done nothing but belittle me, Derek, lie to me, steal from me. You're a despicable excuse for a husband and a father." His face turned an ugly shade of purple, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then, as quickly as it had come, the storm passed, and he deflated like a punctured balloon. "You'll regret this," he hissed, jabbing a finger in my face. "Mark my words, Raylan, I'll make sure you lose everything." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving Harper and me alone in the oppressive silence. "Mom?" Her voice was small, tremulous. "What's going on?" Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I pulled her close, grateful for the solid weight of her against my side. "It's going to be okay, sweetie," I murmured, more for my own benefit than hers. "Everything's going to be just fine." But as I gazed down the hall where Derek had disappeared, a tendril of doubt wormed its way into my heart. Had I underestimated his capacity for cruelty? His willingness to drag us all down in his quest for vengeance? Only time would tell. And in the meantime, I would keep fighting. Keep gathering ammunition for the battle to come. Because one thing was certain. I would never let that man break me again. The day had finally come. With Elise's guidance, I'd compiled an ironclad case against Derek, complete with financial records, audio recordings, and a mountain of damning evidence. There would be no more running, no more hiding. It was time to rip off the mask and expose him for the monster he truly was. "Are you sure about this?" Elise's voice was gentle but laced with steel as we went over the plan one final time. "Once you confront him, there's no going back." I took a deep, steadying breath, my fingers tightening around the thick manila envelope containing the fruits of our labor. "I'm sure. He needs to answer for what he's done." A soft knock at the door shattered the tense silence. "Mom? Elise? It's me, Harper." My heart clenched at the weariness in her voice, a painful reminder of the toll this war had taken on her young spirit. Elise shot me a questioning look, and I nodded, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion. Come in, sweetie. The door creaked open, and Harper slipped inside, her eyes wide and haunted. Dad's home, she whispered, wringing her hands. He's in the living room, waiting for you. My mouth went dry, but I refused to let my nerves show. Squaring my shoulders, I turned to Elise. It's time. She squeezed my arm, offering a grim smile. I've got your back, let's do this. With Harper trailing behind, we made our way to the living room, each footstep echoing like a death knell. Derek looked up as we entered, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Elise. What's going on here? He demanded, rising to his feet. What's she doing in my house? I opened my mouth to respond, but Elise beat me to it. Sit down, Derek, she said, her voice ringing with authority. We need to have a little chat. He bristled, his jaw clenching. I don't take orders from... Sit down. Elise's tone brooked no argument, and after a tense moment, Derek lowered himself back onto the couch, his eyes smoldering with barely concealed rage. Sliding the envelope onto the coffee table, I fixed him with an icy glare. These are detailed financial records, documenting every single penny you've embezzled from my business over the past 5 years. His eyes widened, but he quickly regained his composure, scoffing dismissively. You're delusional. I've done nothing but support your little hobby. Save it. I jabbed a finger at the envelope. The evidence is right there, plain as day, bank statements, wire transfers, everything. Derek opened his mouth, no doubt to spew forth another round of lies and denials, but I cut him off. That's not all. Pulling out my phone, I queued up the first in a long line of audio recordings. I have hours of footage documenting your emotional abuse, your constant belittling and degradation. As his own voice filled the room, hurling insults and venom with chilling casualness, Derek's face drained of color. Harper gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as she listened to her father's hateful words. No. Derek's voice was little more than a hoarse croak. You can't. That's not. It's over, Derek. Elise's voice was cold, utterly devoid of mercy. We have more than enough evidence to bury you in court. You're going to jail, and Raylan is taking everything, the house, the business, full custody of Harper. You've lost. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of Derek's ragged breathing. Then, slowly, he turned to face me, and the look in his eyes sent ice flooding through my veins. You'll regret this, he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. I swear to God, Raylan, I'll make you suffer for this. You and that little brat will wish you'd never been born. Before I could respond, Harper was there, stepping between us with her shoulders thrown back and her chin raised in defiant challenge. That's enough out of you, she spat, her voice trembling but unwavering. You're the one who's going to suffer, you pathetic excuse for a father, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself. Pride swelled in my chest as I watched my daughter stand tall against the man who'd tormented us for so long. In that moment, I knew we would be okay. We would survive this nightmare, and maybe, just maybe, we'd emerge stronger than ever before. Derek opened his mouth, but whatever vile retort he'd intended died on his lips. With a snarl of impotent rage, he turned and stormed from the room, leaving us standing in silence amidst the wreckage of his shattered lies. It was over. The war had been won. The silence that followed Derek's departure was deafening. Harper and I stood frozen, still processing the explosive confrontation that had just unfolded. Elise was the first to break the stillness, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Well, that could have gone better, she muttered, running a hand through her disheveled hair. Harper whirled on her, eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and anger. You think? That was my dad you just destroyed back there. Harper, I began, reaching out to her, but she jerked away, hugging herself tightly. Don't. Just don't. Her voice cracked, and I watched in dismay as tears spilled down her cheeks. How could you do this, Mom? How could you keep this from me? The accusation in her tone was like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. Sweetie, I was just trying to protect you. Protect me? She let out a harsh, bitter laugh. From what? The truth? The fact that my own father is a lying, cheating scumbag? Each word lanced through me, raw and agonizing. Elise stepped forward, her expression softening. Harper, your mom did what she had to do to keep you both safe. Derek is a dangerous man, and I don't want to hear it. Harper exploded, whirling on Elise with clenched fists. You have no idea what you've done, what this is going to do to our family. The anguish in her voice cut me to the core. I wanted nothing more than to take her in my arms, to shield her from the pain and betrayal that had torn our lives asunder. But I knew, deep down, that this was a wound that could not be salved with empty platitudes or motherly affection. This was a hurt that ran bone deep, a festering wound that had been ripped open and left to bleed. "Harper, please." I tried again, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I never wanted to lie to you, but Derek, he was out of control. He was stealing from me, sabotaging my business, and I was afraid if I told you the truth, he might." "Might what?" she spat, rounding on me with fresh venom. "Hurt us? Abandon us? Well, congratulations, Mom, because now he's going to do both of those things, and so much worse." Her words hit their mark, and I flinched as if struck, because deep down I knew she was right. In my quest for justice, for vengeance against the man who had betrayed and belittled me, I had set in motion a chain of events that would undoubtedly tear our family apart. Derek's fury knew no bounds, and now that he had been backed into a corner, exposed as the monster he truly was, there was no telling how far he might go to make us pay. A small, traitorous voice whispered that perhaps it would have been better to simply cut my losses, to walk away and start anew. But I knew, in my heart of hearts, that such a path would have led only to more pain, more suffering at his hands. No, I had done the right thing, the only thing I could do to protect Harper and myself from his toxic influence. But that knowledge did little to dull the ache of my daughter's resentment, the guilt that gnawed at my soul for the turmoil I had thrust upon her. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. "I'm so sorry." For a long moment Harper simply stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she turned and fled the room, leaving me standing amidst the wreckage of our fractured family. Elise's hand found my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Give her time, she'll come around." But as I listened to the distant echo of Harper's footsteps, rapidly retreating, I couldn't help but wonder if the damage I had wrought was too deep, too catastrophic to ever be undone. The divorce proceedings were brutal, a no-holds-barred battle fueled by years of pent-up resentment and betrayal. Derek, his back against the wall, fought like a cornered animal, lashing out with every underhanded tactic in the book. "She's an unfit mother," he snarled during one particularly heated hearing, his eyes boring into me with undisguised hatred. "Manipulative, vindictive. Is that really the kind of influence you want around an impressionable young girl?" I bit back the urge to retaliate, forcing myself to remain composed as Elise rose to my defense. "Your Honor, these baseless accusations are nothing more than a desperate attempt to distract from the real issue at hand, Mr. Collins' repeated embezzlement and financial malfeasance." Derek's face purpled, but before he could unleash another volley of vitriol, the judge intervened. "That's enough, Mr. Collins. I've seen the evidence, and it paints a very clear picture of your actions. Unless you have something of substance to add, I suggest you remain silent." Seething, Derek slumped back in his chair, glowering at me from beneath hooded brows. The message in his eyes was clear. This was far from over. With each passing day, the divisions within our shattered family grew deeper and more pronounced. Harper, caught in the crossfire, retreated further into herself, alternating between bouts of stony silence and explosive outbursts directed at both Derek and me. "I hate you both," she raged one night, hurling a glass against the wall with enough force to shatter it into 1,000 pieces. "You've ruined everything." I flinched as shards exploded around me, piercing my skin with 1,000 tiny lacerations. But the physical pain paled in comparison to the agony of watching my little girl unravel before my eyes. Derek, of course, seized the opportunity to drive the wedge deeper, pulling Harper aside and no doubt filling her head with his twisted version of events. "Don't listen to a word that lying bitch says," I overheard him hiss, his voice dripping with venom. "She's poison, Harper, and she'll only drag you down with her." Part of me wanted to intervene, to shield my daughter from his toxic influence, but a larger, wiser part knew that such actions would only breed more resentment, more ammunition for Derek's manipulative games. So I kept my distance, focusing my energy on the legal battle that would decide the course of our future. With Elise's guidance, I pored over financial statements and witness testimonies, building an impenetrable case against the man who had once sworn to love and cherish me. The realization that our marriage had devolved into this bitter adversarial farce left a hollow ache in my chest. But I knew there was no going back, no chance of salvaging what had been lost. Derek had made his choices, and now he would have to face the consequences. As the divorce proceedings ground on, the media caught wind of our sordid drama, unleashing a torrent of salacious headlines and intrusive reporters. Derek, ever the opportunist, seized his chance to manipulate the narrative, granting exclusive interviews where he painted himself as the long-suffering victim of a deranged, money-hungry shrew. "She's out for blood, plain and simple," he lamented to one particularly eager journalist, his eyes glistening with crocodile tears. "All I ever wanted was to give my family a good life, but it was never enough for Raylan. She let her greed, her delusions of grandeur consume her." I watched in disgust as his lies played out across newspapers and television screens, each fabrication more outrageous than the last. But I refused to take the bait, to engage in the same mudslinging tactics that Derek had embraced so wholeheartedly. No, I would let the evidence speak for itself. The truth was on my side, and try as he might, Derek could never bury that beneath a mountain of deceit and slander. As the media frenzy reached a fever pitch, I found myself longing for the quiet solace of my work, the simple act of creation that had once brought me such joy and fulfillment. But even that refuge had been tainted, the very business I had poured my heart and soul into, now serving as a battleground between Derek and me. In my darkest moments, I wondered if it had all been worth it, the pain, the betrayal, the shattering of everything I had once held dear. But then I would look at Harper, my beautiful, struggling girl caught in the crossfire of her parents' war, and I would know that I had done the only thing I could. For her sake, and for my own self-respect, I had to keep fighting. No matter how high the cost, I would not let Derek emerge victorious from the ashes of our family. Not this time. The day of the final court hearing dawned cold and gray, the somber weather mirroring the weight that had settled over my shoulders. As Elise and I made our way through the courthouse doors, a phalanx of reporters descended upon us, cameras flashing and microphones thrust into our faces. "Miss Collins, is it true you're seeking full custody of your daughter? How do you respond to the allegations that you've been embezzling funds from your own company? Care to comment on the rumors of your husband's alleged affair?" I brushed past them without a word, my jaw clenched in grim determination. Derek, of course, was reveling in the spectacle, pausing every few steps to preen for the cameras and offer up sound bites tailored to paint him as the long-suffering victim. "All I've ever wanted is to protect my little girl," he simpered, his expression one of studied anguish. "But Raylan, she's become unhinged, obsessed with money and revenge. It's tragic, really." I felt Elise tense beside me, and I placed a warning hand on her arm. "Don't take the bait," I murmured. "He's not worth it." Her nostrils flared, but she gave a curt nod, and we continued on our way, leaving Derek to bask in the spotlight he so desperately craved. The courtroom was packed to the rafters, a veritable circus of lawyers, journalists, and gawking spectators. I scanned the crowd, my heart lurching as I spotted Harper sitting towards the back, her shoulders hunched and her gaze determinedly averted from both Derek and me. As the proceedings got underway, it became immediately apparent that the judge had little patience for Derek's grandstanding. He cut through the other man's bloated testimony with razor-sharp precision, dismantling his arguments one by one with cold, irrefutable logic. "You claim your wife was obsessed with money and revenge, Mr. Collins," the judge stated, his voice ringing with thinly veiled disdain. "And yet, the financial records clearly show that you embezzled over $500,000 from her company's accounts over the course of 5 years. How do you explain that?" Derek squirmed in his seat, his bravado faltering under the weight of the damning evidence. "It was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I was simply lying and stealing from your wife, with whom you had entered into a legal contract as a business partner," the judge interrupted, his eyes flashing. "That's what the evidence shows, Mr. Collins. Shall I go on?" As the judge methodically disassembled Derek's house of lies, I could practically feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. Beside me, Elise radiated quiet triumph, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, it felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind from Derek's sails and leaving him reeling. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I am awarding Miss Collins full ownership of her company, as well as sole custody of her daughter, Harper. Mr. Collins, you are hereby ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $600,000, as well as alimony and child support to be determined at a later date. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom, broken only by the muted sobs of a devastated Derek. Elise reached over and squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she murmured. "It's over." But as I turned to face my daughter, my heart plummeted. Harper was staring at me, her expression unreadable, a chasm of hurt and betrayal stretching between us. In that moment, I knew that while the legal battle might be won, the war for my daughter's heart and trust was only just beginning. In the days that followed, Derek's world crumbled around him. His assets were seized, his reputation in tatters. But through it all, he maintained a defiant front, lashing out at anyone and everyone who dared cross his path. It was during one such outburst that Harper, who had been steadfastly avoiding me, finally emerged from the shadows of her self-imposed exile. "You're pathetic," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt as Derek raged and raved in the aftermath of yet another court ruling. "All this time, I thought Mom was the one destroying this family, but you're the real cancer, aren't you?" Derek whirled on her, his face contorted in an ugly snarl. "Watch your mouth, you ungrateful little—" "No, you watch yours." Harper stepped forward, her chin raised in defiant challenge. "I'm done listening to your lies, your manipulations. You're a sad, bitter man, and you've got no one to blame but yourself for the mess you've made of your life." As her words washed over him, I saw something shift in Derek's eyes, a flicker of doubt, of dawning realization that his carefully constructed facade was crumbling. For a heartbeat, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then the moment passed, and the sneer was back, twisted and grotesque. "You'll regret this," he hissed, jabbing a finger in Harper's face. "You and your bitch of a mother will regret the day you ever crossed me." Harper didn't so much as flinch. "Save it for someone who still cares, Dad. You're nothing but a pathetic bully, and I'm done being afraid of you." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Derek gaping in her wake like a landed fish. Our eyes met for the briefest of moments, and in that fleeting glance I saw a glimmer of the old Harper, strong, defiant, unbroken. In that moment, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together. United, emboldened by the truth that had finally set us free. Derek might have lost everything, but I had regained something far more precious. My daughter's respect, her trust. And that was a victory worth fighting for. The weeks following the divorce were a whirlwind of activity. With Derek's vindictive presence finally excised from our lives, Harper and I were free to pick up the pieces and begin rebuilding. Gone were the tense silences, the hostile glares and cutting remarks. In their place was a newfound openness, a willingness to communicate and heal the wounds that had been left to fester for far too long. "I'm sorry, Mom," Harper murmured one night as we sat on the patio, nursing mugs of hot chocolate beneath the star-studded sky, "for the way I acted, for shutting you out when you needed me most." I reached over and squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with a potent mix of love and relief. "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetie. What's important is that we're here now, together. That's all that matters." She offered a tentative smile, and in that moment, I saw a glimpse of the carefree girl she had once been, untainted by the bitter rancor of her parents' war. The sight filled me with a renewed sense of determination. I would do whatever it took to shield her from further pain, to ensure that the damage wrought by Derek's actions did not define the rest of her life. With that goal in mind, I threw myself into resurrecting my fashion line, channeling all the fire and passion that had once fueled my every design. Harper, to my immense pride, joined me wholeheartedly, her artistic flair and keen eye breathing fresh life into my creations. "You know, this whole sustainability thing is actually kind of cool," she remarked one afternoon as we pored over a pile of discarded fabric swatches. "Who knew old rags could look so chic?" I laughed, reveling in the sound of her teasing lilt. "I tried to tell you, didn't I? But you were too busy mocking your poor, delusional mother." She pulled a face, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Yeah, I was young and stupid. Not to mention brainwashed by a certain lying snake of a father." The barb stung, but I knew there was no venom behind it, only the stark truth that we were both still coming to terms with. Reaching out, I cupped her cheek, marveling at the way she leaned into my touch rather than recoiling. The important thing is, we're here now, together, and nothing is ever going to tear us apart again. The words felt like a vow, a solemn promise to the both of us. Harper's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she blinked them away, offering me a watery smile. You're right. It's you and me against the world, Mom. Always and forever. As our new line began to take shape, the media caught wind of our triumphant reemergence, fueling a flurry of interest and speculation. Interview requests poured in, each more eager than the last to get the inside scoop on our phoenix-like rise from the ashes of scandal and betrayal. I dismissed them all with a polite but firm refusal. This story, our story, was not fodder for the gossip rags or salacious tell-alls. It was ours, a hard-won victory forged in the fires of pain and heartbreak. The only validation I needed was the look of pride in Harper's eyes as we put the finishing touches on our debut collection. Gone were the dark circles and haunted gaze. In their place was a radiant, effervescent joy that warmed me to my very core. We did it, Mom, she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate stitching of one particularly striking ensemble. Against all odds, we actually pulled this off. Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, I pulled her close, savoring the moment. Of course we did, baby girl. When have you ever known your mother to back down from a fight? She laughed, the sound ringing like music through the bustling studio. Fair point. Though to be honest, I think it was my stubborn determination that really saved the day. Is that so? I arched an eyebrow, unable to resist the playful banter. Well, in that case, maybe I should start calling you Mom instead. Harper made a face, sticking out her tongue. On second thought, let's not go that far. One diva in the family is more than enough. We dissolved into a fit of giggles, the easy camaraderie a soothing balm on the wounds of the past. In that moment, it was as if the years of turmoil and heartache had never happened. We were just a mother and daughter, united in our love for each other and the craft that had helped heal us both. The night of our launch party, I could scarcely believe how far we'd come. Harper was radiant in one of our signature creations, her megawatt smile lighting up the room as she worked the crowd with effortless poise. Watching her charm and dazzle the assembled fashionistas and industry bigwigs, I felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly stole my breath away. This was her moment, our moment, and no one, not Derek, not the naysayers who had doubted us at every turn, could ever take that away. As the night drew to a close and the last of the well-wishers trickled out, Harper made her way over to me, her eyes sparkling with unbridled joy. "Well," she murmured, looping her arm through mine, "what did you think? Was it everything you dreamed it would be?" Pulling her close, I pressed a kiss to her temple, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "It was more than I ever could have imagined," I whispered fiercely, "and it's only the beginning, baby girl, for both of us." As we stood there, silhouetted against the twinkling lights of our newfound success, I knew that no matter what challenges the future held, we would face them head-on, side by side, unbroken, unstoppable, invincible. A mother and daughter, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the indomitable strength of our bond. Our story was far from over. It had only just begun.